This is the Erasing Shame podcast. I'm your co-host for this episode, DJ Chuang, and today I'm joined with Isabel Tom, who is the author of a very valuable book, The Value of Wrinkles. And she is Chinese American based in the great state of Maryland, and I'm coming to you here from California today. How are you, Isabel? Thanks for joining me for a conversation.
Hi, DJ. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. I enjoy talking on podcasts like this, so thanks for having me.
Yes, and you have a great podcast as well, so we'll add a link in the show notes. Is it also called Value of Wrinkles?
It's called The Value of Wrinkles. It's not hard.
Yes. Yes. Well, you have such a unique calling, and we're going to start our conversation with what comes to mind when you hear the word shame with all that you do.
Oh, boy. Well, I think when I hear the word shame, I actually think, all of my work it surrounds caring. It's all about caring for the older generation and valuing them. But I really kind of go close. I start thinking about my own identity as an Asian American because I really feel like there is even more shame being an Asian American. And I think it just complicates being able to care for somebody as they age. I mean, it just makes it's hard enough when somebody is aging and you're caring for them and you want them to have the best. But then as an Asian American, I think it's just so complex. I think a lot about the relationships between like adult children and their parents as an adult child is caring for their parent, and just how the older generation, doesn't want to talk about certain things. And how that's hard, and then how the younger generation, out of respect, does not want to talk about certain difficult topics. And so that's what I think about it. I'm not sure how to give you an easy answer about what I think about.
No,
Shame.
there is no easy answer, and that's part of the challenge when it comes to the shame, the culture that we all have been affected by. And shame isn't just an Asian thing, it's a human thing.
Yeah.
We see that all the way back in Genesis 3. And I'll share from my personal experience, and I really appreciate yours because I've been ushered into this elderly caregiving season, first with my dad being on bed rest for 3 years during the last season of his life. And this was 10 years ago when he passed. And then more recently, my wife and her parents, being my father-in-law and mother-in-law, have had mental degradation along the lines of dementia and memory loss. And so over the past 3 years, we've had to deal with a lot of challenging life situations. And it's finally come to some resolve this year when both of them are now safely off the streets and not driving and in assisted living. And so in one sense, it's a season of life that all of us, as we become adults and parents and we have children and perhaps, and then our parents age, we're thrust into this season of, well, trying to figure out how do we care for them. But you bring such a rich experience because you've actually worked in the field of elderly caregiving before you had to also provide caregiving for your parents.
Yeah, so actually I started working in the senior care field right out of college. And it depends how you define caregiving, because I lived with my grandparents since I was born. And so I think in many ways I tell people I learned how to be a caregiver before I became a parent. So I actually feel like being a parent is very hard. And in terms of caregiving, that's something that I just, it incrementally got, my responsibilities increased. I was also doing it with my family, but because I worked in the field, there was another part of this whole experience that, I guess it was enriched by my professional experience.
Now, let let's explore a bit because your professional experience, you've worked with non-Asians as well as Asians. So, with the time we have, let's talk about the unique opportunities and challenges in working with Asian elderly.
Yeah,
And
actually, oh,
so,
go ahead.
how do you define what's elderly? I guess after retirement, 65, something like
Well,
that.
officially, it's 65 and up if you look at the term,
Hmm.
older adult, but, some places they will say 60 and up, or you'll see some places say 50 and up, but I would
Hmm.
say officially in the United States, it's 65 and up.
Hmm.
I think when it I think most of my professional experience has been caring for, um, non-Asians because the reality is a lot of Asian families feel bad for having their loved one go, having to send them to an assisted living or having to or not being able to care for them at home. So there's that one layer of shame where if you
Hmm.
can't care for your family, for your older loved one the way that either they hope that you would or culturally, you may be expected to. That's just one area where you could explore. But I would say that in caring in working, so I first worked in the senior living field,
Hmm.
and that is mainly, it is mostly not Asian at all. And
Hmm.
I had this huge, I guess it was a burden that has become greater over time when I was working in this at a retirement community in assisted living in skilled nursing. And that was that I saw these great services for older people. I was learning how to care for older adults, but I knew that like my grandparents would never be able to, even if they could move to one of those beautiful assisted livings or retirement communities, they wouldn't benefit from it because it wasn't catered toward for their needs.
Hmm.
Um, so, I was thinking about this morning in terms of shame. I think one of my struggles as just in general is just not feeling good enough, right?
Hmm.
And so I think especially for adult children or even grandchildren who are trying to care for their elders, Asian elders. I think when it comes to caring for their loved one as they get older, they can really feel like they're not doing what they should be. They're not meeting their own expectations of how they should care for their grandparent or parent, but also maybe the expectations that their parent is putting on them. Um, and I feel like that's very difficult because really our number one, our healthcare system for any caregiver. I mean, November is National Caregivers Month, so I think I'm
Oh.
thinking about this even more.
Mm.
But for anybody who's caregiving in the US, like our healthcare system is really not set up to provide you with all the resources that you need. So you are going to feel like you're lacking and you're going to feel like you're overwhelmed because you don't have the resources in place. And then if somebody is caring for an older person who is Asian, and particularly if their parent, somebody's Asian parent is not as westernized, right? Like
Mhm.
they, they are, they really value and have not, they're more Chinese than American, I guess, or more Asian than American, and they want the Chinese food and they want the community and all of that. You are going to feel like you're lacking even more because the number of services out there specifically for Asian older adults, unless you live, maybe I think in your area you have some of those resources, right? But
Mhm.
even in where I live, my county, the minority is the majority. So there's a lot of Asians in this area. But I think there was one assisted living group home. It had eight beds, 8 rooms. It's closed down because
Mhm.
the owner is, retired now.
Mhm.
So you just don't see those resources out there, and that's not there's more resources that are needed, like having a home care, an aide come to help out and things like that. Chinese speaking aides, I mean, if there is one, they're probably taken,
Mhm.
so there's just a lot in terms of not being able to meet the needs of our elders when we really care to, we want to. And I think that can lead to a lot of stress and overwhelm.
Yes. And that's what we experienced even here in California, where there are many Asians. And my in-laws are Chinese, and we had a very challenging time finding Chinese help, both just people that could run errands for us or provide some services at the home, and certainly in assisted living, even more challenging. And the ones we could find were just not very good quality. It was kind of a mom and pop operation and didn't seem professional. And so we're stuck in this very challenging place to care for those who are family members, and it kind of heightens the family drama. So, what kind of help can we find when we feel like there's no help? And in our situation, particularly, we just were not able and equipped to do that caregiving ourselves.
Oh, that's a loaded question. Okay, so I think the first thing I would say is just realizing that just if your older loved one is not happy and is showing a lot of not just disappointment, but like um not resistance, what's the word?
Frustration.
Frustration, they're just not happy with the way with what you're doing. Like they just seem
Mhm,
like they're so displeased by your your level of action or the way that you're responding. Like you haven't invited them to live into your home, you haven't whatever, right? I think to recognize that that doesn't mean you're not doing a good job, and it
mm,
doesn't mean that you're not doing anything.
mm,
Like I said, our healthcare system is not set up so that you are going to succeed. And in terms of just senior care in general, caring for an Asian elder gets like that much harder because even if you had the money, even if you had the services, even if there were beds and rooms available, even if you had an aide, like it's just, it is not, we haven't gotten there yet in terms of providing really great care to older adults in the US for Asian elders. So just to recognize
mm,
that it's not, it may very well not be you.
mhm,
um, you just have very limited resources and support to draw from.
mhm,
I think taking time to learn and equip yourself, and I think it's less about trying to figure out what services are available, but more understanding how to approach our relationships with our elders. And a lot of times people come to me and they think, "Oh, do you know an Asian or a Chinese speaking aide? Do you know a
mhm,
Chinese speaking assisted living?" And really, I think what we can do even more is just learn to understand the dynamics of our family first,
mm,
understanding, you know, ourselves and maybe where we might feel ashamed for certain things, and trying to identify like the truth about our situations so that we don't end up having a lot of baggage as we care for somebody else.
mm,
Because I think when we haven't processed a lot of our own stuff, it it gets carried into when we
mm.
care for somebody who's older. Um,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, so I think you may know I have a digital course I created, Prepare to Care, and that's exactly
Mhm,
why I created it, is because most people come thinking, "Oh, I need this service and that service. I need more money to be able to provide for my loved one." But I think it's really just understanding how to love somebody as they're getting older, as there are changes happening, and then just understanding how your relationship was and then how it's changing too.
mm. Now, your book also covers a great, deal, as I remember reading it, The Value of Wrinkles. It really
Mhm.
helped us to see, yes, the relationship has changed. It's a different season of life. There's all kinds of needs that can be overwhelming. And you said it well that yes, it's just going to be hard because we're going to be under resourced, but there's still value in the life they've lived, and you provide a number of practical exercises of how to bring that value out so that you can still honor the relationship because the Bible tells us, and there's truth in honoring your parents and honoring your grandparents that we live well in our days. And so, even in that hard season,
Mhm.
there's some valuable things to draw from it. So that's in the book. And then in the course, do you also talk about, well, how do you go about navigating the complexity of the healthcare system and the resources? Or is it more focused on just doing the relational and personal work of understanding the transition?
Well, a huge part of it, it's mainly I start off with, an acronym, an approach. So I
Mm,
kinda give, like, a framework for how we should approach caring for somebody as they're getting older because I think, as I mentioned, we get so distracted by all those other details,
mhm,
and really, I think one of the issues that people often have is resistance of their loved one, and a huge part of it is just that their loved one, our parents are afraid, or there's a lot of different emotions. There's a lot of different things behind. Um, there's a lot of things that people are going through as they are aging. And so if you're not aware of that, then as you're trying to provide services and this and that, that actually is not really, it's necessary, but you're going to hit a lot more resistance. You're going to get a lot more stress. You're going to have a lot more family drama if you can't first step back and say, okay, anytime I'm caring for my loved one, anytime I'm approaching them, like this is how I should care for them. And a huge part of it, and I think as a Christian, like I'm very passionate about this, is it is a really beautiful thing when we can minister to our older loved ones, our older family members, but just an older person in general by showing them that they are valuable in God's sight. And I think
mm,
our culture, our society doesn't do that. And so,
mhm,
so many people as they're aging, I mean, they are ashamed of their age and they
mhm,
really feel, and this is even in Christian circles, is they really feel like, okay, I'm getting older, like I'm useless, there's nothing good about
mm,
me. And so I think if we can first view our loved ones and see that, wow, they're they are so they have so many experiences. They've gone through so much. God has created them like so beautifully. And even in this time when they can maybe not run around and contribute, in the ways that they used to, there are still so many ways that they can contribute. So I think first it's like us realizing that somebody who is aging is still valuable. We have to realize that
mhm,
first, and then helping to minister to our loved ones and reminding them that, because I just feel like over and over, well, if you're around somebody who's aging, especially with health conditions and different and loss, the
mhm,
loss of loved ones, there's so much grief. And so
mm,
it's actually a very heavy time. And I think somebody who is on the older end, like they really need younger friends to encourage them, and because they're going through a lot.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think the word grief is appropriate here because there's so much feeling of loss, loss of abilities and capabilities, loss of memory, uh, perhaps no longer working.
Hmm.
And
Loss of loved ones, their
yes,
support system.
that's another part of it that for those that live in assisted living or just trying to stay connected with friends, that friends pass on, and among their peers, it can feel like overwhelming that everybody is passing, and then people are just waiting around for their turn.
Hmm. Hmm.
When a different way to look at it is to realize, well, you're still here and you have a purpose and you still have value, and others can draw that out and
Mhm.
really support that. And it's kind of like it's funny being Asian. We need that at every stage of our life, but something in our Asian culture
Mhm.
doesn't give us much affirmation.
Mhm.
And I'm just hearing now, oh, even for those who are older, they need it just as much as when we
Oh,
did when we
yeah.
were teenagers and young adults. And all struggle through life.
Yeah,
It's,
affirmation is actually you got one part of the framework.
mm,
A for
mhm.
affirmation. They need
Hey,
affirmation.
hey, we still
So,
need A's. That's great.
yeah.
Well, well, you've been a great advocate. I've had great joy meeting you in person, and I really appreciate your work. Thank you for giving us some tangible things to help those of us that are on the brink of that season,
Mhm.
or bookmark this and file this away and know that there's a resource available to us when we start interacting with whether it's grandparents or aging parents that are elderly. That there are a few resources, even though there may feel like there's not enough. So,
Yeah.
do you have a closing thought as we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, definitely. I think the ideally, you should think about it before you are actually caring for somebody, and I think because it
Mhm,
has to do with relationships, like, to provide good senior care or elder care, it's actually the you take the word care, it's just
mm,
about caring for a person, and so to be able to care well for somebody, you have to have a relationship. You have to know them well enough to be able to care for them and to know their needs.
mm,
So I think it's never too early to prepare to care for somebody or to think about caring for them as they get older. It there is such thing as being too late, unfortunately, right? So
mm.
it's never too early to think about it. So
Well, thank you so much, Isabel. It's great connecting with you. And again, people can reach you at the Value of Wrinkles
so
on
value
Instagram
yep, valueofwrinkles.com.
and valueofwrinkles.com on the web.
Yeah, and on Instagram it's at Isabel C. Tom.
Okay. We'll
Yeah,
add a link in the show notes
thank you.
at erasingshame.com. Great talking with you, Isabel. Blessing to you.
Thanks, DJ.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Get this episode's show notes at our website, erasingshame.com. Subscribe to the Erasing Shame podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or any podcast app. And please add a rating and review so that we can reach more people with our message of hope and healing.